single most dramatic change you've seen in your business, and either since you've been in it or since you've started, the single most dramatic change you've seen? And I'd love everybody to give your thoughts on that. We'll start with you, Josh.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously I'm going to talk about it from a technology standpoint, and we're .com, iOS, and Android apps from a technology standpoint. But I think it's the expectation of access. It's the expectation of a younger audience. We pick on the millennials, as we always do. That
They're fair game. It's okay.
yeah, they deserve it. No. You know, that they have an expectation that technology should be super easy to use, that this attention span of 5 to 7 seconds, or whatever the statistics are, where you jump into a website or an app, that it should do exactly what they want it to do, the user wants it to do instantly. And so from an outdoor standpoint, that is a challenge, because some of these categories that we focus in are highly specialized. So it's a skill set thing. So what we face is essentially two different roles in the platform. We have guests, and that's the consumer side of it, and we have hosts, or the guides. And there's different expectations on both sides. And we're dealing with a really interesting dynamic where you've got, probably on the consumer side, the guest side, you've got sort of that millennial crowd that's very sophisticated in the use of technology. Their expectation is extremely high. And then the contrast, which you've quoted some numbers earlier, on the host side, the guide side, that's an aging population. And they might not even be using technology at all. And so their ability to hit the website, to understand what the value proposition is, or our ability to communicate it for that matter, and then wield the technology all in the span of 5 to 7 minutes or 10 minutes is what we're dealing with. So we call that user experience. And the challenge with I would say any digital marketplace is you've got this paradigm of the consumers and the providers. And usually they're pretty different. So if you pick on Etsy, a lot of the crafts people in Etsy are international. So you could have a middle-aged woman in Vietnam making leather goods. And whatever that person's expectation of a technology from a user experience standpoint is, contrast that with the buyer side from somebody that's in Duluth expecting to buy that product. So the user experience is very, very difficult challenge for us to. Yeah.
Dean.
For us, from a business standpoint, Winnebago 3 years ago was over 90% motorized. We split our business into motorized and towables or trailers. And through acquisition and through growth of our trailer business, we're approaching a 50-50 split between motorized motorhomes and trailers. So from a business standpoint, that's been the biggest change that we've had in the past several years. From a user and a market standpoint, I think the biggest change, or at least one of the biggest, is a movement of our users from being really focused on RVing as their activity, so kind of the traditional RVer, retiree buys an RV, travels around and kind of hangs out with other RVers, to our buyers are becoming much more activity focused. So instead of buying an RV to RV, they're buying an RV to take part in their other activities, whether it's kayaking or biking or other outdoor activities. So that's kind of a shift we're seeing in more purpose-driven, I guess, vehicles, and how do we make vehicles that are supporting a lifestyle as opposed to being a lifestyle.
So my family has had the opportunity to watch the canoe industry kind of grow and change over the last 62 years. So I actually spoke with my folks this morning about this question, and they were commenting that the biggest change that they felt they've seen, and I think this holds true too, is the length of time that people are visiting the wilderness for. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, when backpacking and canoe camping was really taking off, people were going on long, 7-10-day canoe trips and getting, way back in there. Into the wilderness. And now anymore people are coming up and going on 3 or 4 day trips. It's more of a long weekend. I think part of that is we see a lot of families. It's gone away from being groups of men going out together to a lot of people bringing their young families with. And so things like sports schedules and summer schools and things like that get in the way of doing these longer trips. So we now have a lot more turnover in our gear and turnover in the number of people that we're helping, but they're going out for much shorter periods of time, which just sort of changes the way that we interact with those customers, and we have to be a little bit faster about our turnaround with what we have at our place. And we see a lot more people too that are just base camping, that come and just want to stay in the campground that we have on site and day trip into the wilderness and then come back and still have access to a shower house and Wi-Fi and ice cream for the kids. And so there's sort of these different layers of wilderness, if you will, and people are staying in sort of the outer two layers and sort of, venturing in for a day or two here and there. But the days of really long, week-long trips are dwindling, it seems like.
That's great. Shower house, Wi-Fi, and ice cream for the kids. I think that's a new Winnebago model coming out.
I'd like to do Ferris wheel on that.
Yeah.
As far as the biggest, most dramatic change, I think in the context of the overall decline that John mentioned earlier, 1982 was the height of participation in hunting. Just under 17 million U.S. citizens were partaking. That has dropped to the most recent figure that came out just a few months ago from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife was 11.5 million. And a big part of that is due to an aging population and that increasing age of the average user. But I put it in context of that, what I have seen is something that I never thought I would see over the last couple of years, and that is people entering the world of hunting and fishing and foraging that I never thought would, and more importantly, the hunting side of things. People who grew up in an urban environment with no connection to wild places, who come from a background that's about as different from a traditional hunter as you could ever imagine, that as an adult raised their hand and said, I want to try this out. And what's needed and what we do is really take them through that process and again try to simplify that so that they can enter this world of hunting, fishing that is so foreign to them. And if I think about one gentleman that we actually have on as part of a film that will be released this summer, his the most interesting part of that process for him was the actual processing and skinning and butchering of an animal, which I would never have guessed. And this person was so different from the background of someone who ever hunted. So I think we get surprised every day, and I think as things change, we need to set aside assumptions of what we think people are going to like and not like, and things are changing rapidly, and I find that exciting. I think in the midst of challenges, there's great opportunity.
I just heard the other day that Mark Zuckerberg is a deer hunter.
There you go.
Changes everything. Tom?
He probably goes to way better camps than we do as well. We hope so. So for Duluth Pack, being an old company that most of us in this room probably can touch with it on the canoe end of things, over the 11 years that I've been with the company, the Canoe Pack business is a mature business for us, because the people, as was mentioned earlier, are going on these shorter trips. So instead of buying a canoe pack, they'll rent for a 3-day trip. And especially when you're the premier, the top end line of pack that they could buy for the trip versus the people that were going for a 10-day trip or a 2-day trip, and they would do that multiple times a year. So one of the things we looked at right away when we came to the company was, we hear a lot from our customer base that I love your canoe pack, my grandpa had one, my dad had one, what else do you have? And so we just listened to our customer, and the biggest transformation we've had is going from about 75 products to about 300 products in our product line by listening to the customer. And everyone aspires to have an outdoors experience. And it doesn't matter if you live in New York City or you live in Duluth, Minnesota, people aspire to be outdoors. An example is we've done some research, and our website sells more to New York City every day than it does the state of Minnesota. And those people are buying something that they can aspire to have something in touch and something tangible with the outdoors. And so what we try to do is, with any product launch we have, with any new product line that we come out with, is to meet the need that those people say they have, whether they're in Duluth or wherever they are around the world, that they can have that aspiring feel to be outdoorsy, to have something of high quality, to have something that's made in America. So what we've had to do is listen to our customers more than we've ever listened to them before. We've had to go from being a company that was a catalog house to doing no catalogs anymore, doing a lot of electronic means versus through social media, through a website, through email blast. We have a dealer network globally now, which we never had before in our private label business. People love high-quality, made-in-America products, and they want to get their hands on it. And people, like the business people in this audience, are going, hey, we'd love to have some gifting or something like that, and that's been a growing part as well. So it's really listening to the customer on what their needs are, and listening to the new generation, the millennials, because they're pretty smart people, and they're going to do different types of purchases, and they're going to do business differently than I have or I ever will.